So in the general standard definition of the SQL language, as is also implemented by commercial SQL server, there is this command called create database to create a new database. Remember what's a database? It's a sort of a container to have multiple tables being defined. And of course, there's also a corresponding uh, deletion of the database called drop database. So for large objects like database and table, SQL will use drop to delete the table to be sort of a bit different from the deletion of a row in a table, because this is more commonly used, and that command is actually delete, and sort of SQL purposely has it named differently, drop, so that we don't visually it is quite distinct, and we will be alerted to dropping any database, because that's a big deal. Once you drop it, if you don't have a backup, all your data will be gone. So drop database, create database in general. But in SQLite, it doesn't support the two commands, create and drop database, even though it does support the concept of database. So what does that mean? It means that in SQLite, one database is one file. Very simple. So because when you create a database, it will be creating a new file, or the other way around. The presence of a file means that it is itself one complete database. There is no concept called um, database container or a folder. It doesn't gel with SQLite thinking. So there is no container for multiple databases. We don't have a name for that. Now, how do you create a DB file? To create a DB file, you need to use SQLite Studio to manually run it, to create it, or we use programmatic access like Python. So in subsequent videos, once we are able and familiar to operate on SQL, we'll then move on to using Python to create SQL to talk to the database data. Right, so stick on and acquire this SQL language first, then we move on to the programmatic access. Now, I did invite you to download the SQLite Studio earlier on, and if you have installed successfully, you should be able to run it like I do here. All right. Now, at the start, you will see this blank screen. Okay, don't feel demoralized. It's like that because you haven't done anything to it. And also, I like you to think of this SQLite Studio as if you're running Excel to operate on an Excel file. That much I think we are quite familiar, yeah? So much like Excel program operating on Excel file gives us this convenience to easily create data, write formula, edit, save, and print and whatnot. SQLite Studio also offers this sort of user interface for us to interact with the database. Or else, how are we going to, probe into the DB file? You cannot use a notebook or notepad or MS Word to edit it. So it's a little bit, not in the same language. So the SQLite Studio gives us this front-end interface. It's really powerful, user-friendly, free for download, and definitely you should get your hands on it. Okay. Now I also want you to see this Py-on, as you probably are quite familiar now, my temporary working directory. I currently have a database because when I come up with this video, I need to sort of work out a demo first. So it's already there, but your working directory may not have one yet. How do you create one? Okay, here's what I'm going to show you. Click on database, click add a database, add. So over here, we are able to create the database SQLite 3, and you should stick with that version, all right? And either access basic here or else add. Create a new database file. This is what it says. Okay, so what we can do is we click on it, and fortunately it's already saying d:/pi 10 pi on, so that's exactly where I want it to be. And then we say abc.db. Okay, so let's create this. So Right now, it's not able to be open because it's not created. So what we can do is we say test connection, right? And obviously, SQLite Studio knows that you haven't created it, so it creates a new one and tests whether you can connect to it. Now, this idea of connection is kind of a leftover notion. What we are trying to say is, can we open it, right? Because it's really local within your own computer. We're not trying to connect to via the network to a remote server far, far away, say in United States, Russia, China, wherever, right? And so the idea, the name sticks, and we are just testing connection. So if the file is there, it's able to open it, and therefore connection is successful. So we can just say, okay, and now you have a iconic view of the database here, right? And because internally via SQLite Studio, it's linked to this file. It's a plain file, Windows Explorer visible kind of file, abc.db. Underneath it will be tables views. We'll stick with tables first. Right now, if you double click on it, can't see a thing because we haven't defined any table. So it's a database of blank table, nothing there. And we'll need to learn how to create and delete table, right? So far, so good. So we have uh, the ability now to create a database. And if we come back to our SQLite Studio and disconnect from it and delete from using Windows Explorer or your Mac Finder to delete, right? Remove the abc.db, then the database will be deleted, much like we have executed this command, drop database. Yeah. So drop database, create database, not available on SQLite, even though the concept of database is well supported. Now, to create um, a new, what should we call it? A new table. We need to use create table if not exist. Create table. The idea is create table, right? This if not exist is optional, but I would strongly encourage you to always put it in. Sometimes we may need create table if exists some other table. Create this table no, the if exists will be for some other purposes like drop table if exists. So I would strongly encourage you to include these all the time, because if not, and you create table customer and customer has already been created and you're running again because you're testing again, right? You will have error right here. And this is just so annoying because you know that you don't want to manually delete the already successfully created customer table again and again. So it would be nice if you can just put this in all the time. I think this is tremendously useful to me.